There is something about hearing how God has moved in the lives of ordinary people that strengthens our faith in ways nothing else can. Sometimes you read a story and it feels like you're right there inside the moment, watching God prove himself faithful once again. This story of an elderly couple, their sick son, and a praying daughter, is one of those reminders that the Lord still steps into human situations with power that silences every other voice. And as we take our time to meditate on it, you will see the heart of a loving Father who hears, who answers, who heals, and who delights in proving that he alone is God. In a quiet mountainous town in the northwestern part of Connecticut, far away from noise, fame, or greatness, there lived a couple who had walked the earth for over 80 years. These were people who had lived long enough to see life from all sides. And now, in their old age, the Lord had surrounded them with the care and comfort of their son and daughter, who lived with them and watched over them tenderly. Life was simple. Days passed peacefully, and then suddenly everything shifted. One day the son, who had been their support and strength, fell terribly ill. Not just a common cold, not a passing fever. This time it was something deep, something consuming, something that grabbed hold of his lungs and refused to let go. The sickness drained him, weakened him, brought him slowly to the edge of death, and when the doctor finally came, he didn't bring hope, he brought a verdict. He looked at the young man, examined him carefully, and announced with the coldness of medical certainty, "One lung is gone. He cannot recover. He will not live long." You know, there are statements men make that feel final. There are verdicts that fall like heavy stones on the soul. And there are moments when human words seem to swallow every last trace of hope. But Scripture gently reminds us that man's word is never the last word. Whose report will you believe? Isaiah asks. And every believer must learn to answer boldly. We will believe the report of the Lord, because no matter how final a situation looks, the Lord has never surrendered his authority to a doctor, a system, a circumstance, or a prognosis. But in that moment, the doctor's words hit the sister like a hammer. Suddenly the future flashed before her eyes, her brother gone, her aged parents left in her care alone, the weight of responsibility pressing heavily upon her shoulders. Fear tried to climb into her heart. Anxiety tried to grip her. But instead of collapsing under the pressure, she ran to the only place where human sorrow finds divine strength. She ran to the Lord. And oh, what a beautiful picture of prayer this young woman paints for us. She didn't come to God with light, polite requests. She cried out. She wrestled. She pleaded. She poured out her heart before the Lord with tears that spoke louder than words. Just like Hannah and Shiloh, who prayed out of the abundance of her sorrow and grief, this young woman set herself before God until heaven responded. When Scripture says, "The effective fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much," it is speaking of this very kind of prayer that doesn't walk away until the matters of earth meet the will of heaven. And friend, God is not unaffected by the cries of his children. David said, "This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and delivered him out of all his troubles." Again the psalmist says, "Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear." While her brother lay dying, this young woman travailed in prayer, and the God who bends low to hear the broken-hearted whispered back into her spirit with a voice that settled everything, "I have heard thy cry, and have come down to deliver thee." What a whisper that must have been! What a moment! Suddenly fear melted, grief lifted, peace rolled in like a gentle river. When God speaks assurance to the heart, it is sweeter than honey and stronger than iron. She knew without a doubt that the Lord who had spoken would perform exactly what he said, and she rejoiced, because every promise of God carries the weight of his character behind it. God is not a man that he should lie, Scripture declares. Has he said it, and shall he not do it? Once God has spoken, heaven and earth can pass away, but his word stands forever. But it is at this point that faith is often tested, not when we hear God, but when the world tries to contradict what God has already said. The very next day someone walked into their home with the worst kind of news, the kind that tries to erase faith with one sharp sentence. The doctor says he cannot live much longer. The words hit her heart like a dagger, and for a moment everything inside her shook. But she did something powerful, something every believer must learn to do. She held on. She refused to let go of the word God had spoken. She refused to let human voices bury divine truth. She lifted up her eyes and declared, "If men cannot cure him, the Lord can." And that is the turning point of the story. That is the pivot where heaven steps into earth. That is the hour when God shows that faith is never wasted. From the very moment she declared those words, her brother began to get better, slowly at first, but unmistakably. The decline reversed. The weakness lifted. The slow death turned into steady life. And when the doctor returned the next day, he could hardly believe what he was seeing. He examined the young man with wide-eyed astonishment and finally burst out, "What have you been doing? You are better. You may actually get well after all." Isn't it amazing how God turns impossibilities into testimonies? The very man who pronounced death now found himself staring at life. The God who said, "I have come down to deliver," was proving that his word never returns void. Scripture says, he sent his word and healed them. That is exactly what happened here. Within 2 weeks the sick young man was back on his feet, working on the farm, breathing, living, moving, doing things even healthy men might avoid in damp and foggy weather. Against all natural expectations, he was restored fully. And this is where the story quietly unfolds its truth like a flower. It wasn't herbs, or medicine, or chance, or whether it was the prayer of faith. The same prayer James speaks about when he writes, "The prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up." The same faith Jesus honored when he told the woman with the issue of blood, "Daughter, your faith has made you whole." Faith does not perform miracles. God does, but faith is the hand that reaches out and takes hold of what God is already willing to do. And so this testimony from a small, quiet town becomes a witness for every generation. When doctors say no, God can say yes. When man reaches the limit of his ability, God's power is just beginning. When people speak finality, God steps in with resurrection. And when a believer dares to trust God in the face of contradictions, heaven will move mountains to honor that trust. Let this story settle into your heart today. Maybe you're facing a situation that feels impossible. Maybe a doctor has spoken over someone you love. Maybe a door feels shut. Maybe circumstances are whispering defeat. But the Lord who answered this praying sister is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He still hears. He still answers. He still delivers. He still heals. And he still whispers into the hearts of his children, "I have heard your cry." Hold on to him. Stand firm. Refuse to let the world steal the word God has placed inside you. Because when everything says it is over, the Lord can still do it.